let's talk about the stories first, because you're in America, you're much more known as a story writer. And I'm always fascinated to know, when you are feeling the impulse to write something, do you know immediately that it's a story rather than a novel idea? And where do your ideas for your stories come from? Because that collection is so varied. How does that process work for you as a writer?
I definitely know when it's a story or a novel. Simply because if it's a novel, I'm overwhelmed by it, and I'm like, oh God, this is going to take time, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't rush into this, or, you know, I have no idea how this is going to end. You know, something like that. Where I get the ideas for my stories is really from everyday life. Usually when something irks me, when there's a contradiction between what I want and what I'm doing, really. It's like, how come I can't just do the thing that I know is good? You know? Like quitting smoking, you know? Or, I mean, that's a really boring example, but like, why can't we just be good? What's keeping us from doing that? And the examples of that are infinite. I usually get a voice in my head that is the story, you know, dying to be told, and I kind of have to figure it out, or it starts picking at me and until I can't ignore it. But I really don't ever, you know, pre-think a story. I'm just like, oh, I think the next story is going to be this.
If you're trying to look at sort of themes that are sort of consistent through the collection, I came up with words like alienation. A lot of these characters are sort of on their own, and often trying to find somebody to connect with, and it's their inability to do that that's the sort of the crux of the story. There are slight misfit characters as well, but there's a lot of humour as well. I mean, they're quite dark stories, but they're often very blackly funny as well. People have responded in the same way, I guess, to Eileen. There is that darkness there. Are you surprised that people maybe don't find them as funny as you do?
Well, okay, a couple of things. Like, the first thing is, when I write them, I'm not thinking, oh, this will be funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, oh, he would probably say something like that now. And I'm just kind of riffing. And then there's a lot of editing that happens. I don't think of myself as a comedic writer. Comedy just happens because that's life.
Yeah.
And I also love I love pushing a character just like a little bit over the edge so that they seem ridiculous. And, but I'm not really trying to make people laugh per se. I don't see myself as an entertainer. And then to the second part of your question about people who's like, oh, that's really twisted and dark. I mean, it's like, yeah, there are different kinds of people. Some people are made very uncomfortable by anything that isn't peachy keen, you know? And who knows why they are that way. I find those people really boring, sorry, you know? Like, if you don't like my work, that's fine. There's trillions of books that won't disturb you. What isn't twisted and dark?
Yeah.
What isn't? Look around.
Yeah.
I mean, twisted and dark means new and interesting. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth.
There's often as well, there's a focus on amazing physical detail, which I don't think you see a lot in writing, and particularly not about female characters. There's been a bit of sort of shame and disgust in a lot of male writing. You mentioned Portnoy's Complaint when we were talking earlier, which is a book which is filled with male physicality. But your female characters, Eileen, and in these stories as well, often are very fixated on parts of their body and the process of being physical. Do you know where that comes from, or why that's something that you seem to sort of focus on in the writing?
I don't think that it's something I focus on. I think it's something that most people ignore.
Right.
Getting back to my curiosity about this conflict, an internal conflict about what I believe and what I'm doing. Is my behavior a demonstration of my sense of reality or not? Well, we all go around saying like, oh yes, we accept and enjoy everybody and every variety of human, and it isn't fair to discriminate. Yet those are the same people who spend 8 hours at the gym, go on diets, go to tanning salons, etc. So and I'm not judging them at all. I have compassion for both sides of this conflict. But isn't it weird that we both strive to embrace our imperfections and yet aspire to be perfect? I mean, and that's just one aspect of the body, you know? And literature is a you know, people think of it as like an intellectual art. You know, it's mostly words and ideas and stories. Visual art, you know, you can really, like, you can paint a nude woman, and people have been doing that since they could, you know, like, draw on the wall of a cave. You know, oh my God, the glory of the body. And it is beautiful. And then it gets very complicated because it's immediately made into pornography. So it's like, okay, I'm not immediately, but it's like, it's really the difference between art and entertainment. Can you have a beautiful woman in a book who isn't celebrated as like the magic source of drama? You know what I mean? So many books fail because of the flimsiness of the love story. It was like, oh, you didn't really even know each other, you just wanted to F her. You know? That's not a story, that's a comedy. And that's why I write short stories making fun of that.
Yeah.
You know? So anyway, it's a very long answer to your question about why I like writing about the body in an intimate way, and that's mostly because I have an intimate relationship with my body. I know every single inch of it, you know?
Yeah.
And I've had lovers and I've known every single inch of their bodies. And it's nothing, you know, and I think, I don't know what it's like to live in cultures that really embrace our organic selves, but at least in the Christian America that I come from, death is really frowned upon. Nobody wants to think about themselves rotting in the earth, and certainly not aging, God forbid. You know, this is $1 billion industry. So it's like, if I can just call attention to the body for one moment, and it feels really important, actually, you know? I mean, I'm gonna die one day. This body is not long for this earth. I'm not gonna spend a second more trying to avoid it, and especially not in my artwork.